Here's an interesting comment left on my recent video about the dating of the Book of Job. It reads, "The sophisticated poetic writing tells you it's presumably modern literature. That is to say, the poetry is so good, it's got to be one of the later texts in the Hebrew Bible." Now, in my video on the Book of Job, I also argue that it's one of the later texts in the Hebrew Bible on the basis of some of its linguistic features and its intertextual relationship, the fact that it seems to be quoting from 2nd Isaiah, which is also itself a later text. But I don't think you'll find very many biblical scholars willing to try and date biblical texts on the basis of the sophistication of their poetry for at least two important reasons that we ought to be conscientious of. First, it's very difficult to judge the sophistication of poetry in any quantifiable way. You can have long, complex, existentially tense poetry that is nevertheless not that sophisticated in its writing, and you can have short, pithy, concise poetry that, because of its word choice or themes, nevertheless appears quite sophisticated. And who's to say that the text of Job itself is sophisticated? There are some reasons to think so. Again, its length, its breadth of topics that it covers, the complexity of some of its sentence structure, but it also has a lot of words with questionable meaning in it, and the structure of the poem is actually broken towards the end. The three cycles that make up the speeches between Job and his friends ends up being ruined at the end through some poor editing. And there's repetition, some misassignment of some language to the wrong characters, and then an editorial addition at the end with Elihu's speeches. So the structure of the poem isn't very good, as though it's not very sophisticated. But a second reason why I think you won't find very many biblical scholars trying to date texts on the basis of the sophistication of their poetry is because it's almost universally agreed upon, and I do mean almost universally agreed upon, by biblical scholars, that the two oldest things in the Hebrew Bible are sophisticated pieces of poetry. And those are Exodus 15 and the Song of the Sea, and Judges 5 and the Song of Deborah. Both these pieces of poetry are linguistically creative, thematically complex, and theologically dense. The Song of the Sea also manages to tie in a bunch of mythic themes common throughout ancient Southwest Asia, and Judges 5 and the Song of Deborah manages to tie in a bunch of historical legends about fictive kinship relations that were important at the time in which the poem was composed. So if some of the quote-unquote most sophisticated poetry in the Hebrew Bible is actually some of the earliest stuff that we have, then we can't be too cavalier in trying to judge the dating of texts on the basis of the sophistication of their poetry.